Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 213 of the Falcoholic Live. I am your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by a very special guest on the show today. He is Aaron Freeman at Falcons, host of the Locked On Falcons podcast, contributor also at the wonderful thefalcoholic.com. Aaron, thanks for coming on once again. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I rejected coming on last week because I didn't want to come on after a win. And unfortunately for my negativity, the Falcons won again. So I have to say positive things about the Falcons this week.
I know I know it really hurts you. Just like we're all just the biggest haters here that we only do this for those sweet podcast bucks. So, that's the only reason. Yeah. Yeah,
you don't even pay us that much.
That's what the comments are. The strangest part is like, if you knew what I make, you would not say that I'm just here for the money. I think anybody that works in this business is probably not here for the money unless you're on like ESPN, like Eric or something. He's just left this all behind with his high and mighty ESPN job now. But as you guys can see, as always, joining us Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way. Adnan, how are you on this fine Wednesday evening?
I'm doing well. Very excited about a win. I couldn't come on last week to talk about the Seahawks victory, but that was a good one and another fun game. It's always fun to win. First time the team's been 2-2 since the last time they made the playoffs. Is that a sign of things to come? I don't think so. But yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. I'm pumped up. I watched that Arthur Smith mic'd up video that the team put out, and it had me ready to run through a brick wall. So, I'm here for
it. Yeah, it's always nice to have a win here. We don't know how many of these we're gonna get. Obviously, it's nice to start out with two. Being 2-2 at this point is important for the Falcons' potential playoff hopes. Some I know are much higher on that possibility than others.
And potential division title hopes.
Yes, I know. Well, if you predicted the Falcons would be playing for the division, the Week 5 division title in Week 5, then you're dead on, because they are playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are also 2-2, and the winner of that game will take sole possession of first place in the NFC South. Which it's interesting that the Falcons are in contention for that. We'll definitely talk about that and their surprisingly good start to the season, not just in the win-loss column, but statistically speaking, this is a much better start than last year, so we should give them their credit for that. We'll also talk about some of the challenges they're going to face right over the next 3 games. It's a very difficult stretch, but then they'll have a much easier stretch after that, where they could potentially, if you're high on the team, make up ground. And, of course, before we get to all that long-term stuff, though, we're going to talk about the Falcons' Week 4 victory over the Browns, where they absolutely dominated up front with the run game. And we also got to see, of course, clutch plays from Grady Jarrett, that beautiful man, and also, I think, some good play from a couple other players that we'll touch on. Before we get to all that stuff, guys, again, thank you for tuning in. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff. If you have any questions you need us to answer, streamlabs.com/falcoholic/tip. We will answer those questions. Of course, we'll try to get to stuff in the chat as much as we can as well. But yeah, let's start off with the news today. There's a couple of notes in terms of injuries and also some roster shuffling. First of all, the big news, Isaiah Oliver, designated to return off IR, did apparently practice in some capacity today. Potentially big addition coming back. Aaron, as the special guest, you get to take the first commentary here. Do you think there's a chance Oliver could play this week, and how big of a boost to the defense would he be at this point?
Yeah, I think there's got to be a chance. I think the way the rules work is there's like a 21-day window, so it's not necessary that he has to play this week just because he's back at practice, right? Basically, he can get a little bit of runway before he has to play. So if he needs like 2 full weeks of practice, then he can get that. But certainly, you hoped at the end of the summer when you saw him in that preseason finale that he was close to being 100%, and then it was kind of a little bit of a shocker that he went on IR and we missed him for 4 weeks. And so I think if the Falcons can get him back, whether it's this weekend or next weekend. I think it will be a big boost for this team moving forward. Obviously, the Bucks have a bevy of weapons in which they can throw to. I don't know exactly who they are because they always seem to be one guy injured each and every week. I know Mike Evans is healthy because he's on my fantasy team, so that's the one thing that really matters to me. But I think getting Oliver back will certainly be a big boost. I think Mike Ford and Dee Alford have done good work in his stead. Obviously, Alford had the big play at the end of the Browns game that sort of sealed that victory. But I certainly think, you might be able to get a little bit steadier presence from Oliver and allowing Dean Pease to do a lot of the sort of disguise stuff that he likes to do in the secondary, which he hasn't done a lot of this year compared to previous year. And maybe that is due to not having that trusted gun in Isaiah Oliver back there.
Yeah, I agree. I think Oliver brings you a more physical presence. He's going to offer you a little bit, because I think Dee Alford in coverage in particular has been good. The ball hawking that he provides, and he's been sticky. But as a guy that's like 5'10", 175, never someone that's going to be a huge impact player against the run. I certainly don't think he's like a poor tackler or anything, but he's not moving the pile when the tight end's coming at him, or an offensive lineman. So I think that the Falcons probably like the size and proven ability of Isaiah Oliver as a blitzer over Alford's coverage. And, we saw Oliver play pretty darn well in that 4-game stretch in 2021. So obviously the hope is that he could be back healthy. Now, what do you think about Oliver's return? Do you expect to see him out there this weekend?
Maybe if not this weekend, then probably next. But no, I'm very excited. I would think that they will, if he does play this week, I think that they'll at the very least ease him back into it, because he hasn't played in a year. But remember, before his injury last season, which ended his season, he was having a career year. I think he really found his home in that slot cornerback spot. He struggled a bit in that outside cornerback spot, but he really found his niche in the NFL. And I would love for him to give the Falcons that kind of production again. We obviously don't know when it comes to knee injuries like this how fast he's gonna get back into form after coming back. But it's always good to see someone fight back from injury. And it was a shame to lose him last year. I think that was a big blow to the Falcons defense. And it'll just be a great enhancement to have him back in that position where he was in last season, where he had so much success. And yeah, I can't wait to see him back out on the field, first and foremost for him personally. I'm really glad that he could fight back from this. And now it's all about overcoming that mental hurdle of having such a long-term injury that so many players will tell you about. We know about the physical stuff, but it's about him getting back to that position of, I can make this tackle again without being apprehensive, without being hesitant that I'm gonna hurt myself, especially playing on turf the way that Mercedes-Benz Stadium is. But yeah, I can't wait to see him back out there for the team.
Yeah, me too. I think his addition could be a big one. And it's interesting. They've rotated a lot at that slot position, and I do wonder if that's because they like Dee Alford's coverage, but they would rather have Mike Ford's run stuffing, or they even had Eric Harrison there against the Rams. And I wonder if having Oliver back sort of makes it so they don't have to rotate as much. I mean, I'm sure obviously they'll play dime sometimes and stuff like that, and they'll bring an extra DB out there, but I wonder if the stability of possibly having Oliver playing a much larger role, like 50 plus snaps, if that helps the defense in terms of their communication and helps everything get sort of settled a little bit more. Who knows if that is actually part of the issue or if it's been other things, but particularly in zone, there just seems to have been, there's a lot of coverage busts, and I don't know. I'm looking for any excuse I can to try to figure out what exactly is going on there. I mean, obviously the Falcons, pass rush isn't great. It's certainly been better than last year, but I do wonder if Oliver's presence could bring some stability and consistency to that secondary that they haven't had as much of, I think, as much as maybe we'd hoped going into the season. Despite the fact that Dee Alford, I think, has been one of the real unearthed gems that they've found this year. I think there's definitely something there, even though, like I said, his size is somewhat of a limiting factor. I think he's clearly good enough to play in the NFL, as a depth piece at worst. So I'm excited to see how he continues to develop as well. The other player, roster move, Falcons finally signed my draft crush from 2017, Jaleel Johnson, the defensive tackle. He eluded the team for 5 years, but he's finally in Atlanta on the practice squad. The team needed to replace Khyiris Tonga, the nose tackle, who was signed away by the Vikings. Somewhat coincidentally, Jaleel Johnson was drafted by the Vikings back in 2017, so a little revenge, even though he wasn't, on the Vikings right now. But Adnan, any thoughts on Johnson? Any interest at all there? Do you think it's sort of just more rotational bodies for this defensive line that kind of desperately needs them at this point?
I definitely think it's rotational. But it's nice to have someone with NFL experience ready to be elevated if there is an injury, if there is something that unexpected that happens moving forward. Jaleel Johnson has 5 years of NFL experience. He had a season in 2020 where he started all 16 games for the Minnesota Vikings. He was with the Houston Texans for the majority of the season, playing in the majority of the season last year. It's definitely one of those moves where in the short term, if something happens to one of your defensive line pieces, you can rest assured that he'll be able to cover it at the very least for a game or two. So I'm always all for having a veteran presence in the practice squad and in the team if and when it's needed. And it's a long NFL season, injuries happen, so it's a signing that I like to see.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly liked him coming out. And we've seen guys come off the practice squad and actually get graduated to the roster with like Abdullah Anderson, who's become like an actual kind of core rotational piece, and I think acquitted himself pretty well so far. But yeah, Aaron, you got any Jaleel Johnson takes from back in the 2017 draft for us?
Yeah, I know a lot of people were very high on him. Our good friend Charles McDonald was very high on him back then. And what was interesting about Johnson is he kind of got lost in the shuffle in Minnesota for a couple of years there and barely kind of played those first couple of years. And then, seemed to figure things out by the end, but probably not to the degree that I think they envisioned to be able to give him a second contract there. And he's kind of just bounced around the league the last couple of years. So piggybacking on what Adnan said, I think it's valuable to have someone on the practice squad, someone ready to go that's played in the NFL and contributed in the NFL in the event of an injury. But I think Rush and Abdullah Anderson have done good work so far this season. And hopefully, the Falcons won't need Jaleel Johnson as those guys continue to provide that sort of physical presence in the middle of the defensive line. And you got Grady Jarrett and you got Taquan Graham coming on really strong. So this defensive line looks a lot better today than I thought it was. I thought it was going to be a major liability, major weakness heading into the season. And I've liked what I've seen from that group so far. I wish we could get a little bit more from Timmy Horn at this point in time, but maybe that's an opportunity for someone like Marlon Davidson to potentially come back in the next couple of weeks and maybe push him a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. But I think adding Johnson, certainly getting more bodies into that room certainly isn't going to hurt the Falcons.
Yeah, I agree. I like Johnson a lot. I think that certainly he's sort of shown himself to be more of a rotational player than like a high-end starter like a lot of us hoped. And I remember that combine workout just really disappointing to a lot of people, and that's part of the reason why I think he was like a day 2 projection for a while and then had that like 187 RAS score posted, ran like a 4 or 5 4 or something like that in the 40.
19 reps on the bench.
Yeah, and that sort of tanked his stock into day 3. But I think he's shown that he's certainly capable. I think he's had some solid production in like a limited role over the years. So a guy that's a veteran presence, knows what he's doing. I think he had a pretty good 2019. 3.5 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. What was the pressure rate? I think he had 6 pressures as well. And he's always been a very good run defender, like very low missed tackle rate. And those stats on just 400 snaps also in 2019. So he's shown he can be effective. Good size too. So I like him. I wonder if we'll ever get to see him if everyone stays healthy. Maybe not, or like Aaron said, perhaps pushing Timmy Horn a little bit as another like bigger defensive tackle. But yeah, I agree with what Aaron said, and that's sort of a good segue into talking about week 4 and sort of this first quarter of the Falcons season as a whole, because the defensive line I think has been an unexpected bright spot. It's I think getting the contributions they have from, we mentioned Abdullah Anderson, who hasn't been like a flashy player, but as basically like a mid training camp signing, coming out and playing a role, and not being a liability. That's always nice. And then you've got Taquan Graham, who I think has been the most pleasant surprise so far on the defensive line. Grady Jarrett obviously being amazing helps as well. So I think you like what you've seen from the young edge rushers too, particularly Arnold Ebiketie, who had a strong game, even though it didn't blow up the stat sheet this week. I think he's earning and taking more and more snaps away from Ade Ogundeji, who I would say has probably been the most disappointing of all the edge rushers so far. And Lorenzo Carter, I remember before the season I said Lorenzo Carter will play the most snaps of any defensive lineman / outside linebacker edge type. And I think that has definitely come true. And I think he played 97% of snaps against the Browns or something like that, some crazy high numbers. So they're almost treating him like a linebacker that doesn't leave the field, which I think is a good fit for him. But yeah, Aaron, I'll go to you first. Who are some of the defensive linemen that have like stood out to you so far, both in week 4 and sort of the first quarter of the season?
Yeah, Taquan Graham is one, as I mentioned earlier, and you just mentioned. I put out a highlight clip of his from the Browns game on my Twitter, so people could check that out if they haven't already. And he's been a pleasant surprise. I think the thing about Graham that really stands out is how powerful he is. And I'm going to compare him to a player that didn't quite live up to expectations here in Atlanta, but we did see flashes of it. And that's Rashid Hageman. And if you just kind of think back of that Super Bowl run where Hageman kind of got a bigger run of plays after Adrian Claiborne's injury, and you started to see him make some of those impact plays down the stretch for the team, like that's kind of what Graham has been in my eyes. It's sort of using that strength and just kind of overwhelming offensive linemen, not particularly technically savvy or anything. You're not seeing any real pass rush moves. He's just kind of bullying guys. And that kind of reminds me a little bit of Hageman. And hopefully, Graham can continue to build off of that, which we never saw from Hageman, and be more of that all-around player. He's certainly a force in the run game. And I think he's leading the team in hits, although he hasn't quite gotten a sack yet. So hopefully those will come. But yeah, I think that defensive line, obviously Grady Jarrett's made sort of the impact plays at the end of the last 2 games against Seattle and Cleveland. So those guys have standed out for me. Carter is another guy that stood out to me. Ebiketie had a really strong game. So I like the direction of this front. Things are looking up. The thing about Ebiketie for me is like he got like 6 pressures against the Browns, and a lot of it was just kind of like coverage, good coverage, leading him, getting more time to get to the quarterback, or like a play action play where he was kind of unblocked off the edge and harassing Jacoby Brissett. But one of the things that stood out to me in the Browns game was like he tried to pop off a spin move. It didn't really work. I think it was against Jack Conklin. But I like the fact that he's like trying different things. Ebiketie was a real technical pass rusher at Penn State. And I like the fact that he's like trying to do different moves and whatnot, rather than just basically I'm a speed guy or I'm a power guy, which former Falcons high round pass rushers were a little bit too one note in that regard. But I think Ebiketie, you're starting to see some progress from him, and hopefully you'll start to see more plays like we saw in that week 1 game where he got that first sack moving forward. So I like where this front is heading. It's not where we need it to be in order to provide that reliable pressure, down in and down out. But certainly they've been able to close out some games these last couple of weeks, and we'll take what we can get at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I'll elaborate some more on that, but I wanted to give Adnan a chance to weigh in too. Adnan, what do you think about the performance of like the defensive line, the edge rushers so far? Has that been better than you were expecting going into the first quarter of the season?
Yeah, it's been a pleasant surprise. I mean, remember last season, this team was, so far last when it came to quarterback hits, sacks, that it was like that scene from Moneyball. It's like, oh yeah, there's like, good teams that have a lot of sacks, and there's like 4 teams, and there's like 50 feet of shit. And then there was the Falcons having 17 sacks on the season, where even if you doubled it, they would have been, or 18 sacks, excuse me. Even if you double that number, I think they would have still been bottom 10. So, this season it's been nice seeing that pressure, and it makes you very hopeful, because yeah, Grady Jarrett's doing it. Like, Grady Jarrett is doing Grady Jarrett things. He has come up with a couple of super timely sacks the past couple of weeks to just shut down the advances of the Seahawks and the Browns, and to pretty much end their hopes, because it was the same formula. Final drive, Falcons are winning. Grady Jarrett gets a sack. Very next play, interception. Game is over, more or less. But then beyond that, the Falcons have so much young talent on this team that you're, really, very hopeful for and very excited about. Aaron mentioned Taquan Graham, who looks like he is Grady Jarrett's partner in crime at this point. He has taken that one technique role, that starting defensive tackle role, or the defensive tackle role next to Grady Jarrett for the majority of the game role, and he's pretty much run with it. I think Baldinger on Twitter, Brian Baldinger, had a breakdown on Taquan Graham, which was really cool to see. Just going in 2 minutes, just talking about all the great stuff that he saw from Taquan Graham the past game, which is great, because that's the kind of stuff that'll make Graham a bit more known in the mainstream. But beyond that, we mentioned Abdullah, or Kevin, you mentioned Abdullah Anderson a bit earlier. He's been a pleasant surprise as a rotational piece. D'Angelo Malone had a couple of really nice plays last game. It's all these young guys where you're so excited to see them, getting their chances. And this is admittedly a transitional year. Coming into the season, we looked at it as a transitional year. And, it's so exciting seeing some of these building blocks being cemented in and put in from a foundational standpoint from the very beginning. Because I recall during the Mike Smith era, even when this team was bad, we were just screaming for him to put in some of these young players, like, I think Jonathan Massaquoi, and it was Stanley Mipanga at one point. Shout out to about a decade ago. But it's really cool when, you're getting results. And like Aaron said, this is by no means a finished product for the Falcons. This isn't where they want to end up, but it's a good starting point. We still need to see more. We still need to bring in more pieces, and we still need to keep building and keep organically growing as time goes by. But it's so exciting to see that great start, and to see some of that success with these really young guys who you're hoping will be with the organization for years to come. And I'm just really excited. The Falcons came into this season as the second youngest team in the NFL, and so far so good. These young guys have been up to the task. The teams look very fun. The teams won a couple of games. best start since 2017, like I mentioned, and it's no different from the defensive line. It's I'm really excited to see some of these young guys continue to grow and continue to keep doing what they're doing next to the veterans like Grady Jarrett, who really, in all honesty, has never had much help around him in years past.
Yeah, I think it's been something we've like clamored for as long as I can remember, like trying to like please get this man some help. And it's not for a lack of trying. I mean, they haven't drafted a lot of interior guys. I mean, they sort of whiffed. Obviously, like the Hagman thing sort of fell apart. Probably more
Marlon
for
Davidson,
more for off-field reasons. Marlon Davidson. Man, I can't even remember his name now. The third round pick. Deidrin. Yeah, Deidrin Sanat.
Yeah, so the Bucks.
Yeah.
and
Bucks legend. Yeah.
they've missed on some edge guys who also would have kind of made Grady's life, a bit easier. Tack McKinley.
And over TJ Watt, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure TJ Watt would have been a lot of help. But yeah, it's not for a lack of trying. It's just they've been taking swings. They've just been whiffing over and over again. So hopefully, but that's the old regime. Hopefully
Right.
this new regime is getting some hits. Where I just want a single. I don't even need a home run. Just give me a few singles.
We just need some singles. We just need some W's, even if they're lowercase W's. I'll take them at a certain point. But
let's round the bases with some.
Yeah. We got to, thanks for the baseball analogy. I know the Braves just clinched the division, so good for the Braves. Yeah. I think this is a good thing to talk about too. I think people were fairly down on the 2021 draft class. After the rookie contributions weren't great, outside of anyone not really named like Kyle Pitts. And we got some contributions from some of the later round picks, but I think after the first 4 games of this season, you feel a lot better about it because you're seeing Richie Grant look like one of the better young safeties that's coming up in the NFL, like we hoped. You're seeing Taquan Graham become a starter as a mid day 3 pick. That's always nice to see. And we're getting contributions from Ogundeji, and I think you feel a little bit better about the way things are looking now with that group, certainly. Not to mention the contributions they're getting from the last crop of Dimitrov picks, like Jalen Hawkins, Michael Walker. These guys look like they're rounding into form. The only one that doesn't seem to be getting any run at all is Jalen Mayfield. Maybe that's because he's on IR. But I suspect
that's the reason.
I suspect maybe that he wouldn't be getting much run if he was off IR, and I wonder when he will return from IR this season. But really to me the defense has been very erratic, I guess we'll say. We've seen them look quite good, shockingly good against the Saints for a lot of that game, and then fall apart, give up a ton of yards. But they do seem to tighten up, especially late, which is except for against the Saints. The other 3 games, they've sort of tightened up late, especially in the fourth quarter, and just made enough plays to help the Falcons get the W, or in the case of the Rams, make enough plays to make it where they had a chance to get the W at the end. And that's something I'm not really used to seeing with this unit. It's a welcome change for the Falcons not to be getting outscored, 20-0 in the fourth quarter every week, certainly. But is it sustainable? Is it just good luck? That I can't really answer. But Adnan, what do you think is the deal here? Why is the defense suddenly able to make these stops in the fourth quarter when all last season it felt like, outside of a handful of flashy performances, they were blowing these leads, and then the last couple of weeks they've managed to actually hold on?
For one, I think part of it is, they're in year 2 under Dean Pease, and Dean Pease talked about how in year 1 he couldn't really implement everything that he wanted to within his playbook. He said he had 60-70% of what he actually, of his actual defense implemented last year. It had to be very simple. And the other thing is just great individual defensive plays. You mentioned Richie Grant. Last year he didn't really contribute very much, didn't really play very much. This season, he's looked like a top 10 safety in the NFL, like 4 weeks in. I know I'm not saying he's a top 10 safety right now. That's a bit premature, but he has made some incredible plays out there. Like I remember this isn't in the fourth quarter, but what was it on that 4th and goal early on against the Browns last week, or was it maybe it might have been the 3rd and goal, which forced the 4th and goal, where he got that stop on Nick Chubb at the goal line on that play where they tried to run it to the right. Richie Grant came shooting in and just stopped him. You're talking about guys like Darren Hall making that forced fumble against Cooper Kupp against the Rams and recovering it by himself. Grady Jarrett's being Grady Jarrett, stepping up in a very timely fashion. And the defensive line is getting more pressure this season than it was last year. We just went on a whole tangent about how much better the defensive line in the front seven looks, and that's helping the secondary. That pressure is helping these guys in the secondary come up with those game-saving, game-closing picks. So I think it's just a combination of a lot more individual, success, individual brilliance, and individual moments combined with, I don't want to say better coaching, more so coaching where, Dean Pease can sort of do more of what he wants to, because these guys know more of the playbook this season. And, just combined with having more of a pass rush presence, that having a better pass rush can really mask a lot of flaws. And, this defense has, plenty of flaws to it. But, it's not an imposing pass rush. But if you're talking about this season versus last season, it's not a high bar to clear at all. Like the Falcons defense this year isn't amazing. They're the 8th worst scoring defense in the NFL this year, but they're making timely plays. Individual playmakers are making plays that are needed, and the pass rush just being a bit better than it was last season. It's become a recipe for success, and just giving the defense a chance to close it out late in the game is giving us more of an opportunity to see it in this positive light, because, the offense gave them those leads against the Seahawks and the Browns. I don't think that they looked great for the most part, but in both of these games, but they did manage to, come away with the timely stops when it's needed. And here we are seeing their praises as a result.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good explanation. My thoughts are fairly similar on that, but I do want to give Aaron a chance to weigh in too. What do you think sort of is the key to the defense being able to tighten up and actually get some stops late in games? Do you think it's personnel, the scheme, more years in the system, or is it just good old-fashioned good luck late in games?
Probably all of the above to a certain extent. But I think Adnan makes a great point. I think, ultimately the thing that's easiest to focus on, it's like how much is coaching involved, how much of it is good luck. Like those are kind of intangible things that it's hard to sort of put your grasp on. But the thing that you can focus on is the execution, right? Like you go back to that week 1 game against the Saints, and why the Falcons collapsed in the fourth quarter is they didn't have good coverage on the back end, right? AJ Terrell gave up a number of big plays to Michael Thomas. Jarvis Landry beat Casey Hayward, where he showed bad technique on that 140-yard gain that sort of set up that final score. And the Falcons got no pressure in the fourth quarter after 3 quarters of getting steady pressure on Jameis Winston in that game. And then you sort of look back at the last couple of games, and what have they done? They've gotten much better coverage on the back end. AJ Terrell has locked down DK Metcalf and Amari Cooper and taken away their number 1 wide receivers. The last 2 weeks is probably a big part of their success, where in the fourth quarter, when Jacoby Brissett and Geno Smith are driving, they want to throw the ball to DK Metcalf. They want to throw the ball to Amari Cooper, and they can't. And then you're talking about Grady Jarrett, making plays, Lorenzo Carter making plays in the fourth quarter and getting that pressure that we did not get in week 1. So I think, ultimately at the end of the day, You just kind of look at the execution, whether it's, better coaching, whether it's more familiarity in the system, whether it's benefiting from facing, two unstellar quarterbacks the last couple of weeks, whatever you want to put it on. But I just think at the end of the day, you got to make the plays, and the Falcons have done that the last couple of weeks, which they didn't do in week 1.
Yeah, and I think, we're seeing, obviously the Lions defense isn't like great, but the Seahawks put, 48 points on them. And, I think a lot of people going into that game thought that the Falcons defense was like a pretty big liability. And, to some extent, it's the bigger liability of the two sides of the football. But the Falcons held the Seahawks very much, to a reasonable score, whereas the Lions absolutely got obliterated, with a 48-point tsunami, despite the Lions putting up 45 points of their own. So, I mean, I think there's something to the Falcons defense probably being closer to like 20th, 22nd, as opposed to like low to like that. It's probably more like below average than bottom 4 like it was last year. And I think that's a pretty big step up for them. And we've seen they've been opportunistic. If that can continue, that obviously helps their chances of winning close games if you can steal a few possessions here and there. And it's also like if they're going to try to cobble together a strategy of like winning with this dominant ground game and grinding out these victories and limiting your opponent's possessions and that sort of thing, like obviously it would help to have a better defense, but if you're keeping your defense off the field with these long drives, that can help cover up some of the weaknesses there as well. So it just seems to me like there's a more coherent team strategy like altogether, and a lot of that probably has to do with they have more of the players that they actually want. They're able to, get out from some of the deals or some of the players that weren't necessarily this regime's choice. They still didn't have a lot of money to play around with. They did have some draft picks, obviously, but I think we're starting to see a little bit of a clearer picture of what Arthur Smith sort of wants this team to be. It's not firing on all cylinders, which we'll sort of transition into talking to here in just a second with the offense. Certainly some parts of it are absolutely firing on all cylinders to even a shocking extent. Talking about the run game. Passing game, very hit or miss in the last, basically this week. It was extremely hit or miss. And I know Aaron's got some Desmond Ridder takes that we're going to get to. But we got Ray Moon with the $5 before I forget, asking about, okay, I know you guys hate Felipe Franks, but with Patterson and possibly Pitts out, do we see Arthur Smith actually use Franks in this coming game, I believe is what Ray wanted to ask. So, Franks has been active. I think he's always sort of been like, okay, this is the break glass in case of emergency Kyle Pitts replacement. It may be that it's just Ferkser that comes in more. I don't know. But the chance, like if Kyle Pitts for whatever reason doesn't play, and certainly hope that he does, it may be that Franks gets some work out there. So it's possible. It's possible. What do you guys think about the possibility of us seeing Franks actually get some meaningful snaps in week 5?
I'm all for it.
Big time. Yeah. You want him to take snaps at quarterback, though, right?
I want him to take snaps at every position. I want Felipe Franks all over the field.
Just any time Felipe Franks, just smash that anytime Felipe Franks touchdown.
Special teams, tight end,
wide receiver, quarterback. What do you think the odds on that are?
Safety.
Felipe Franks, anytime touchdown.
We'll put Felipe Franks in around the goal line to scavenge some of those rushing touchdowns, as if the fantasy community doesn't hate Arthur Smith enough. Just go salt to the earth right now.
Yeah, he's going to put in Franks and just immediately throw a touchdown to Felipe Franks, and it's just going to be like
I would love
chaos.
it. There was nothing would thrill me more if Felipe Franks scores a touchdown on American soil before Kyle Pitts.
That would be the ultimate troll job. So I do support that from that angle, certainly. As long as they win, I don't really care. Like, throw it to whoever's there. But, also it would be nice. I don't have Kyle Pitts in any fantasy leagues, so it doesn't bother me. I would obviously like to see him get thrown the football because he's very good, but it doesn't hurt my fantasy team at least. So I'm agnostic on that front. But this is I want to continue to talk about the offense because the passing game very inconsistent. I figure we talk about the positives first, which is that the run game has been, awesome. Just drastically better than I think even the rosiest predictions could have placed it this year. This was the 31st running game in the NFL last year. They they did change out 2 starters on the offensive line, and Drew Dahlman, who was on the roster but was behind Matt Hennessy, and then they added Elijah Wilkinson and Colby Gossett when he had to play. They didn't miss a beat with him in there either. So, a couple of improvements in terms of switching out players. We've also seen Chris Lindstrom be like maybe the best guard in the NFL over the first 4 weeks, so that obviously is helping. And Caleb McGarry-Island coming in hot. He's looks like a pretty consistent starter, which has always been his issue. Was can he string together the good games without the bad ones? And so far, I think that he has. I'm gonna save McGarry-Island for Aaron, but Adnan, what do you think the secret to the run game success is? Because maybe you could have said Cordarrelle Patterson, but when he left the game late, they continued to just run it down Cleveland's throat with Tyler Algier and Caleb Huntley. So what's sort of your thoughts on why that seems to be clicking so much better than it did last season?
I have no fucking clue, to be honest.
Black magic. Yeah.
I mean, to be completely honest, this is just an inexplicable improvement. Like, this was the 31st ranked rushing offense last year. Right now, they're 4th in the NFL. They've had 2 separate games where they've had over 200 yards rushing. And you can point to, and it's not even just, you put in a scrambling quarterback, Marcus Mariota. Mariota had 3 rushing yards last game on 5 carries. It's been insane. I think PFF had that stat that the Falcons also lead the NFL in rushing yards before first contact, which is a full-on group offensive line statistic, and is much better indicative on the offensive line than total rushing offense that I just referenced. But yeah, I mean, they have more continuity this season than they have last year. Some organic growth. Chris Lindstrom has been the best guard in the NFL, so that helps. But Chris Lindstrom was awesome last year as well. I think he's PFF's second highest graded offensive
number 1.
line.
Yeah, he's number 1 guard, I think.
He's the number 1 guard. He's number 2 behind only Andrew Thomas. Go Dogs, who's also been very awesome over with the New York Giants this season. So yeah, it's just been complete improvement all across the board. And Drew Dahlman looks very good outside of some poor snaps here and there, but he's been an improvement over last year's version of Matt Hennessy. And Jalen Mayfield is not there, which helps, just
addition by subtraction. Yeah.
Elijah Wilkinson has looked good. You mentioned when Colby Gossett went in there, he just did not miss a beat. Caleb McGarry looks like he really wants that second contract, and he has had such a big improvement. But this is just inexplicable. I know we're just 4 games in, and I know that the Cleveland Browns were missing most of their defensive line, but they were doing this against the New Orleans Saints, which was one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL last year as well. Overall, like, you can point to a number of things, from the continuity to the organic growth and organic improvement, but I would love to know, the last time a team has gone from, bottom 3 rushing to top 5 rushing over the course of one offseason with such minimal offseason, additions and improvements that this team has had. It's been absolutely insane to watch. Maybe there's some scheme stuff. Arthur Smith has been, cooking some stuff up. Seeing some of those runs, it's been a really nice, zone heavy look some of the time. I saw one play last game where Drew Dahlman snapped it and he pulled himself, and he became the lead blocker on the left side, and he had a pancake block on that play. But yeah, it doesn't matter who you put in there. Caleb Huntley was killing it. Tyler Algier had 8.4 yards per carry. I feel like behind this offensive line, the way it's going, I feel like one of us could get in there and get a few rushing yards you know. But yeah, I don't know what's going on, but keep doing it.
Yeah, I think they've just been nailing the run blocks. I think both Aaron and I took a look at some of these plays, and there's just they were just hitting these blocks and they weren't doing that to any level of consistency last year. So I think that's a big part of it, certainly. But Aaron, I know you need to take your victory lap at least after week 4 on McGarry Island. It seems like it's quickly rising up from like a 2-star to a 3-star. It might even be a 4-star resort by the time the season's over.
Yeah, I got to take this victory lap now because Nick Bosa's showing up in a couple of weeks. So,
Yep, there
I
he
don't know
goes.
if I'll be able to take it after that. But yeah, McGarry Island, as you said, Kevin, the big knock on him was always the inconsistency. You would get good games from him, and then you would get very bad games from him. And obviously, when it comes to offensive linemen, most fans and most media only remember the bad games because otherwise, if you're playing well, you generally go unnoticed by most people watching football. And so, I think McGarry and this group, it's been impressive. I know for me, a big reason why I was not optimistic about this team heading into the season, because I just couldn't fathom their running game being as effective as it needed to be in order for this offense to be as consistent. And as Adnan says, like going from like I figured, okay, maybe they can go from like bottom 5, bottom 3, whatever they were last year, to like maybe 20th or something like that. Like that to me seemed like the best case scenario for this run game. And to be, again, a month into the season, but 4th best in the league is incredible and unfathomable, as Arthur said, as Adnan says, it's inexplicable. And like trying to put your finger on it, it's like, okay, yeah, McGarry's better. Obviously, Lindstrom is better. Dahlman seems like he's an upgrade over Hennessy. Obviously, Elijah Wilkinson's an upgrade over Jalen Mayfield, who should not be named.
Yeah.
Jake Matthews is playing better. He was terrible last year as a run blocker. He was great as a pass blocker, but he's terrible as a run blocker. He's not been outstanding this year, but he hasn't been like this liability like he was at times last year. Parker Hesse is getting you value. Kyle Pitts is a better blocker. The receivers are, that size at the wide receiver position that everybody was hyping up, I think brings some value as, downfield blockers and all that stuff. And, Cordero Patterson played great in that week 1 game. He was just like running over Marcus May and Honey Badger and all those guys. So that's a contributing factor. But when you sort of talk about the black magic and the sorcery, like some credit's got to go to Dwayne Ledford, right? And I remember talking about this on Locked On Falcons during the summer where I was like, okay, I don't believe in this run game and in this offensive line's potential, but if you are going to make a case for this offense and this run game working, your case is basically hinging on Dwayne Ledford, the Falcons offensive line coach, living up to the billing as, one of the top offensive line coaches in college football, and that translating to him basically being that in the NFL and bringing that success. He was kind of the Alex Gibbs of college football, and it seems like maybe he could be the next Alex Gibbs of the NFL football. So it's inexplicable, but like some of that credit has to go to Dwayne Ledford. I think at this point in time, to see this unit blocking as well as it has this season. And then again, I think some of it is the diversity to the run game that Arthur Smith is bringing from his play calling. Adnan mentioned that play where Dahlman on the Avery Williams run, like they didn't run that play at all last year. And so they're doing a little bit more diverse things with the run game. So maybe that's helping things out and confusing defenses a little bit, because last year they had like 4 run plays and they just ran that over and over again, even when it wasn't working. So like, again, there's a lot of factors and a lot of variables, but I do think, probably the biggest one may be Dwayne Ledford and his coaching.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I'm
go
just
ahead.
imagining what Mike Davis is thinking, just seeing this right now. Like, like, whoa, well, you guys couldn't have done this shit for me last year, because Mike Davis would take a handoff and there would be 2 defenders in his face, like 3 yards, in the backfield.
Yeah. This is not his fault. I mean, I think we all knew Mike Davis was not necessarily a guy that was going to like create, but like if you could get it blocked up for him, he could carry a couple guys and do good stuff. And we just did nothing to help him whatsoever. And, I wonder, we're going to see Damian Williams probably somewhat soon. He's eligible to return from IR as early as next week. And he's going to have to probably take on a bigger role with Cordero Patterson out, but it just seems like if your run blocking is good enough, and a lot of people have made this argument, right? If your run blocking is good enough, it doesn't matter to a certain extent who your running back is, because as long as they're competent, you can't just have any bum at running back, but as long as they're competent, they understand the blocking scheme, they're well suited for it, and they, hit those holes correctly and with power and, that sort of thing, like that, it's going to be just fine. Like you're going to be able to run the ball effectively. And we've seen now three, I mean, if you could probably count Avery Williams as well, like, because every time he gets a handoff, it seems like it's like a big run. Even though he hasn't gotten a lot of volume, he certainly has averaged a very healthy yards per attempt, actually leading the team with 9.3 yards per attempt on 4 carries. So, maybe Avery Williams secretly the best running back of all, but no, I'm just kidding. But, Caleb Huntley, Tyler Algier, both over 5 yards per carry at this point. Huntley's had 11 carries, Algier 26 carries. Both have shown that they're capable there. We saw Tyler Algier show off his receiving ability, yards after catch. I mean, maybe the Falcons are just set. Like if this run blocking can continue, and the Bucs are certainly, I mean, I don't know if statistically speaking, the Browns were actually, I believe, a better run defense than the Bucs are. But also the Browns were missing Myles Garrett. So, that's a huge loss.
And Taven Bryan.
Bryan more of a pass rusher, but still, I mean, his starting defensive lineman, and Anthony Walker wasn't in there. He missed most of the previous week as well. But the Bucs, often known as a great run defense, this year about a little bit above average, 12th in yards allowed, 14th in yards per attempt. So certainly not a bad run defense, but not as dominant as they have been in years past. Their defense in general has been really good in scoring and overall yards, but sort of, average against the pass in terms of yardage. They've also only faced like the 27th. I think they're like 27th. They faced the 27th lowest pass attempts is what I'm trying to say. So they haven't been passed on a lot because they've been in a lot of close games. But I think the Bucs defense gets a reputation for being really awesome, and I think they are very good. They're 5th in scoring defense, but maybe not as dominant as they have been in years past. We'll have to see if they get some of these players back from injury, like Akeem Hicks was out in week 4. But that's going to be a tough matchup, certainly for this offense, and that brings me to, of course, the final thing we're going to talk about, which is the inconsistency of the Falcons' passing game. It was low volume in week 3, but I think ultimately still effective. And I think in weeks 1 and 2, it was better. This week against the Browns, talked about it on the post game and on the film review. It's just a pretty. It was very inconsistent. Certainly, there were a few missed calls. Like I think there were certainly 3 plays where there's probably holding or defensive pass interference. There were a handful of drops, but mostly I think it was just Marcus Mariota's least accurate performance. And I think that this passing game is probably going to be somewhat limited with Mariota. I think we all sort of realize that. But it does beg the question. A lot of people have already started calling for Desmond Ridder. Aaron, I know, as the president of the Please Start Desmond Ridder for Any Reason club. What do you think about Mariota's latest performance, and what do you think the realistic timeline is for Ridder?
Well, despite a lot of tweets that suggest that Desmond Ridder is already on the path to being a Hall of Famer, I do understand the Falcons' patience when it comes to playing him. Obviously, the big concern going into the season was, is he going to play behind a bad offensive line with no run game and no defense? And the Falcons have checked, at least 2 out of those boxes, and certainly in the fourth quarter have checked the defensive box. And so the idea that he would not get help and be thrown to the wolves doesn't truly exist. And that's, I think, led a lot of people to feel like, okay, why aren't we playing Ridder? And I get that. I do think you can make a pretty easy argument based off of how Mariota's played these first 4 games that the Falcons' offense and their passing game could be better with Desmond Ridder using sort of what he did in the preseason and operating a pretty precise and throwing within rhythm play action passing game, and being able to run some more under center stuff. And you've seen various places like ESPN talk about the value of running play action from under center and how that's more advantageous than doing it in the shotgun like the Falcons have done quite a bit with Mariota. But I think when it comes to Mariota, we saw flashes of what Mariota kind of brings to the table in the Browns game. Obviously, you didn't see the consistency you want to see, but like the value of Mariota is never going to be he's going to be the type of quarterback that is going to drop back 30 times and throw for 250 yards or anything like that. Like that's not really his style of game. What he's going to bring to the table is sort of those off structure plays. And you saw that with that big play to Parker Hesse in the first quarter. You saw that with that big play in the fourth quarter to Olamide Zaccheaus. He wasn't able to quite hit some of those throws to Kyle Pitts and Drake London at various points when he can kind of break outside the pocket and buy his receivers more time to break open down the field and generate some of those explosive plays. So like if the Falcons can start hitting some of those more consistently, then I think you can start to see the positive side of what Mariota brings to the table. But I certainly think given his performance and sort of the inconsistency that he has shown, you're going to continue to hear people call for Desmond Ridder, and especially if the Falcons in this upcoming slate of games where they're facing some better defenses like Tampa Bay, and if those defenses live up to those expectations and can slow down this running game and force the Falcons to play more left-handed, and basically those teams are going to want Mariota to go out there and beat them. And if he doesn't show he's capable of doing that, then I think the calls for Desmond Ridder are only going to get louder as the month of October progresses.
Yeah. I like that description. And, I know everyone, as soon as you draft a quarterback, right, there's always going to be the legion that decides like, okay, like we're going to call for this quarterback at the first possible opportunity. And I think Mariota deserves credit for like his first two games. And I think he's had a series of shakier outings, with this one being the only one I consider to be like bad. And I think he needs patience. He deserves like more opportunities, but to me, it's like you can't sort of shake the feeling that there's maybe some training wheels on this passing offense, and you could also make the argument that Desmond Ridder would certainly have training wheels on his version of this offense because he is a rookie coming into the NFL for the first time. So I don't think it's like Ridder might offer you more as a passer, but to think that they're going to suddenly be able to explode into this huge playbook with a rookie quarterback just because his arm is probably a little bit better, and I think he sees the field better than Mariota. I think that's been one of my biggest pet peeves with Mariota, is that he really excels in like chaos. Like you've seen him with these bad snaps or with blitzes in his face. Like he can get the ball out, he can pick up that snap, get rid of it. He can avoid these catastrophic plays, except when he loses the fumbles, of course. Luckily we haven't had too many of those in recent weeks, but he doesn't really see the field super well, I think. I think there's been a lot of times where you've seen that, if he'd gotten to read the whole field, he would have seen, oh, this guy's open, or this is a better throw. There's been some, forcing to Drake London, which Drake London's very good, so I don't blame you. As fantasy folks will point out, there hasn't been a lot of forcing to Kyle Pitts that they'd probably prefer. But I do think that Mariota offers you stuff that's important, right? Especially for this type of offense with his ability to threaten the run. I do wonder if we see more of that. I think they sort of like after week 1 and 2, they're like, Mariota, you got to calm down. You're going to get yourself killed, like running like that. Like, please just slide. And, maybe like you cut back on that a little bit. And then the last 2 games, it's been almost non-existent. Mariota's running. It's just been for a few yards here and there. It's very much been a secondary, tertiary part of his game, even though he still threatens that. I do wonder if they will try to take advantage of his running ability a little bit more, especially to help, enhance the running game. But they haven't been able to hit those deep passes with any consistency, and it's been open. And I think that's like that's when this Arthur Smith offense becomes what it's meant to be, right? We've seen it in Tennessee with Tannehill. When they're able to hit these explosive plays off play action with the running game humming, it becomes just really difficult to stop, because that on any play, 1st and 10, 2nd and 1, doesn't matter. Like they could dial up a deep shot to Kyle Pitts or Drake London or Damiere Byrd, who showed off his speed on that play. Like they could just dial it up. So like if you sell out to stop the run game, which is going to be what's going to be coming your way on a high number of plays, you're gonna leave somebody one-on-one in that deep passing game, and the Falcons haven't been able to take advantage of that yet. I think that's sort of the next step. I don't know if they'll be able to really do that with Marcus Mariota on a consistent basis. I think he's shown that he can hit those plays sometimes, just hasn't been at a rate that you probably want. Maybe Ritter offers you more of that, but as a rookie, I would hesitate to sort of assume that just because he might be a better passer, that he's going to just instantly elevate this offense. I think he brings some things to the table that Mariota doesn't, and Mariota, of course, brings other things. But it's complicated, certainly, and we'll get, I wouldn't even think that they would consider starting Ritter until the end of this brutal 3-game stretch that we talked about. Like, I don't think you throw him in there against the Bucs. I don't think you throw him in there against the 49ers and their number 1 defense. And you probably don't throw him in there against the Bengals, who have a really good defense either. Week 8 is probably the earliest possible time. And that's probably only if Mariota absolutely bombs, which obviously we hope that doesn't happen. Because I think we all would like to see the Falcons play good football as much as possible.
Not me.
We're not. Yeah, Aaron's the hater, so that's. I forgot Aaron was here for a second. So yeah, but I mean, ultimately, no one's rooting for Mariota to bomb. So maybe some people on Twitter are. But yeah, Adnan, what do you think about the whole quarterback situation? When do you think that potential change is the earliest possible time you could see it happening?
Well, I think it'll happen at some point this season. Marcus Mariota, he does a good job of what's asked of him for the most part, but he definitely caps the ceiling of this offense a little bit. We've seen it this season. He makes he's a 1 to 2 read type player. And he'll make his mistakes here and there. I think last game he threw that interception, and it almost felt like Arthur Smith was like, "All right, this is enough. We're gonna run the piss out of the ball," like you said on the mic'd up. And that pick came after a string of incompletions, if I remember correctly. But I definitely don't think that they will, and I don't think that you want them to put Ritter in against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or especially against the San Francisco 49ers. Do you really want his first game to be against Nick Bosa and, that Niners team that just made the Rams look like a joke on national television? Or the defending AFC champion Bengals? I think the earliest possible time period will be, that game against the Panthers possibly, and that's if Mariota struggles, if he plays the way that he did in this past game. I think when they do see, or when the coaching staff feels that they have a better chance of winning with Ritter, they'll insert him over Mariota. But I do think it plays into part of, you don't want him to start against, some of these brutal defenses. My original guess at the very beginning of the season was his first game would be against the Bears, and the reasoning for that was because the team doesn't have a bye until very late in the season, and they have that sort of mini bye, that the 10-day break between the Panthers game and the Bears game. I think I'm at the point where it'll. I'm leaning toward it being a bit earlier at this point. But I certainly think that, rounding it out down the stretch of the season, we'll see Desmond Ritter, and we'll see what Desmond Ritter has. And those calls are getting louder and louder, and it's not helping that over in Pittsburgh they made their switch. They pulled Mitchell Trubisky for Kenny Pickett, and he has a pretty brutal, first test against the Buffalo Bills in his first ever NFL career start. I will see how it goes for him. I would not want Ritter in that situation right away. He'll get his opportunity, but there's no need to make this harder than it needs to be, and it's already hard enough being a rookie quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think there's no need to force him on the field either. you got the Bucks, you got the 49ers, you got the Bengals. We talked about that. But then there's this stretch before the bye of these 6 games where if the team weathers that 3-game stretch, like if they could steal 1 win out of those 3 games, I think we'd all be pretty happy with that. And I don't think it would necessarily crush their playoff hopes if they were to lose all 3, but it would definitely put them behind the 8 ball. But again, after those 3 games, you got the Carolina Panthers, you got the Chargers, you got the Carolina Panthers again, you got the Bears, you got the Commanders, and you got the Steelers. Now, like the Chargers, I think are certainly a team that is capable of beating anyone and also losing to anyone. So, they're probably the most difficult of all the players of all the teams on that list. But the Panthers are just god awful. The Commanders are just god awful. The Bears are okay to bad, and the Steelers, maybe by that time Kenny Pickett will have things humming there, and that's a better team. Maybe TJ Watt will be back. That could make that a much harder game. But I think you could feasibly go 4-2 in that stretch if this team continues to fire, on all cylinders. And that would mean that they would actually go into the bye with a winning record, right? They would be 6-5-ish. Oh wait, no, I guess they wouldn't have a winning record. They would
6-7.
6-7. So they'd have a slight losing record, but it would be very close.
But then they'll beat the Saints after the bye.
Yeah, there you go. So that's what I was thinking of. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think that they have a chance in that 6-game stretch. If they're going to make it, they're going to clean up in that stretch. Like they're going to have to really maximize winning there, because after the bye, you have to go to New Orleans, which is always going to be a really tough out. The Saints maybe aren't that great, but it's still in New Orleans. It's a tough game. You got the Ravens on the road. Probably would be wise to expect to lose that game. But you do have the Cardinals, who, as you know, in December are like one of the NFL's worst teams. And then you get one last shot at Tom Brady. So, maybe we can finally knock him off his horse there. But, that at 2-2, they're certainly in the conversation, especially in this NFC. Like there's a non-zero chance that 8-9 gets you into the playoffs in this NFC. So, I wouldn't say it's particularly likely, but it's not. Crazier things have happened with that 7th seed. So, we'll see certainly how that goes. But difficult stretch coming, guys. I'm glad they took advantage of this little weaker group of opponents here, but we're gonna really see how this team handles some good opponents over the next 3 weeks.
Just wait until they go 3-0 over these.
There you go. Then I'll officially say you guys can light the playoff banners. You can start, getting hyped. If they go 3-0 over this stretch, then I think pretty much everyone in the NFL media will be buzzing about the Falcons if they somehow pull off that miracle. So
I see George in the chat is already saying we're going to the Super Bowl.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. By the way, George, let me out. Did you ever place that bet on the Eagles?
It's looking pretty good now.
It's looking like a hell of a bet right now.
Yeah.
$1,000 before the season started. I don't know what odds you might have gotten on that, but the Eagles look like the best team in the NFC right now.
Yeah. Yep.
Part of that is the NFC looking like total shit, but got to take them as they come.
Yep, got to take them as they come. We did have one question come in from DJ Stud 1987. Very nice name. Thank you for the $5, DJ. He says, if we are in the hunt for the playoffs in November, December, do you guys see us signing an impact free agent like perhaps a Sue to bolster the D-line or any other position of need? If they can trade Deion Jones, they'll have some money, so it's possible. I think the big thing is the Falcons need to be in it. Like if they're clearly in it, or if they're leading the South somehow or something like that, and looking like this is a team that's actually potentially going to be able to do something, then they might get interest from some of those free agents like Sue. I think right now Sue's not picking up the phone if the Falcons call. He's like, yeah, no, thanks. But that could change, right? But what do you guys think about that? Do you think that they could consider a big addition if they look like they're seriously competing for the playoffs?
Yeah, they just made one with Jaleel Johnson.
There you go. I'm sorry. I should have known not to slander my own man in Jaleel Johnson. So I don't even know who's still out there, to be honest. I'm sure there's some people. But...
Well, you kind of have to think going back to what Adnan said, like they kind of have to do some stuff over this next 3-game stretch, right? Because the trade deadline's at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to make a move, we do have at least a player that we could shop. So, that can create some opportunity there. So, yeah, if we come out of this 3-game stretch 2-1 or 3-0 possibly, then yeah, I certainly think big moves may be on the horizon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, just looking to look here and see if there's anything potentially interesting. There's Linval Joseph still kicking. I don't know if he wants to play. That's the only thing that would lead me to question that, because I think he's someone the Falcons probably would have called if they were looking to replace Eddie Goldman. I would think he's like Eddie Goldman that's bigger and also like 5 years older or something like that. So, he's more of a 1-year rental type, but I think he still had a pretty decent season last year. Sheldon Richardson, perhaps.
Ryan Pace could make a move for Robert Quinn or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even care. Like, trade away next year's first. Just get us an edge one. Like, I mean, depending on how they're playing, like they may not be in range for Will Anderson or any of these top edge rushers anyway. So yeah, I mean, if it takes.
Robert Quinn had more sacks than the entire Falcons team last year.
Yep. So, I wouldn't hate it. Yeah, unfortunately, Tack McKinley already signed, so we can't bring him back.
No. What's Jonathan Babineau up to these days?
Right. I need to make a call. So
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. I know you're the one we can trust there. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see if they're in that position. I think it's possible they could, certainly, but I think at this point, they're gonna wait and see what happens. And if they're looking really good, then maybe someone like Sue, if he's still out there, is like, actually, I would consider signing with the Falcons if it's like late in the season and he still hasn't been picked up. Maybe he would consider a little, payback with the Buccaneers. They didn't re-sign him, right? So we could offer that. I mean, probably we'll only be able to offer him one game against the Buccaneers at that point, but unless he's going to be here in the next, couple days, seems unlikely to say the least. So we get that one revenge game narrative going, but yeah, interesting times for the Falcons. Like I said, 3 tough games coming up, then a winnable stretch. So if they do end up going 0-3, we're probably not going to be panicking. It won't be fun to endure that, but I don't think it's really going to change my perception of the team unless they get like blown out every week or something. But if they could steal one of those next 3, that would be nice. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me which one. I mean, obviously the Bucs one would be the best one to steal because it's your division, but I'll take any of them, to be honest, and I would be pretty satisfied with that. And even 0-3 wouldn't be that shocking or upsetting, just because it's a really tough stretch.
I will say I was pleasantly surprised just by how much the Benz was popping this past game. It looked very lively. It was very loud, and I can only imagine that if they do steal this game in Tampa Bay next week, this coming week actually, which I'm not picking them to beat the Buccaneers, but crazier things have happened. Well, maybe.
Yes.
Well, the Falcons have never beaten Tom Brady, but this would be the week. Tom Brady has some personal shit going on right about now. So I can only imagine just how insane and rocking Mercedes-Benz will be for that 49ers game. That'll be the red helmet game. They'll be at 3-2, first time above 500 since 2017. And yeah, the fan base will absolutely just be all in. And it'll be a raucous crowd against a very good team, and against Kyle Shanahan, this team's old nemesis. So yeah, let's expect the worst, hope for the best, and yeah, crazier things have happened. Maybe we pull it out against Tampa Bay.
I think that would be really funny for from the NFL chaos angle. Certainly, that would be the best outcome, because everyone would be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe the Falcons are leading the NFC South." That would be like the biggest topic on like every morning show, like after Week 5. Like somehow the Falcons are like leading the NFC South and in the playoffs.
Peter
right
Schrager is already calling us the
Yep.
Bengals of last season.
Little premature probably before this stretch. But I mean, I won't ever be upset with anyone praising the Falcons, certainly. All right, got a last-minute donation here from George Costanza with the $1. Braves swept the Mets and clinched. We are going to the World Series, folks. Falcons also going to be winning the Super Bowl. I think we're going 2-1 over the next 3. Brady is stressed from the divorce. Adnan, let's get that hype train started. So
okay, I'm gladly getting the hype train started for the Braves. I think the Braves can absolutely repeat. The Braves have that shit. I'm not starting the hype train over the Falcons being 2-2. For the record, I picked the Falcons to be 2-2 in my 5-12 prediction. It just feels really, really good in the moment. Let's see what they do over the next 3 games. But personally, objectively, I don't think I'd pick the Falcons in any of those next 3 games. Crazier things have happened. I hope I'm wrong. And you know what, George? If the Falcons go 3-0, I will make a commitment to you to start that hype train and to have it fully rolling after those 3 weeks. And my word is good because I had a pickle juice slushy on
That's
air.
true. He did. He did. I think Aaron avoided the pickle juice slushy, actually. So.
I'm just now realizing that.
Aaron got out of it. We did it on the next show, and he wasn't back on here. So a very deft maneuvering from Aaron there, even though he had no idea probably. But we're still gonna bury you. Sorry, for the bit. Yeah, guys. Really appreciate. Oh, we got one more. Okay, George sneaking it in here before the buzzer. I will accept that, George. Thank you. With the $3, he says there was no way to place his bet. He was going to bet $1,000 on the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. It was like plus 10,000 at the time. There was no way to place it when he lived in Texas. Can't risk defrauding the government or Vegas. Can't risk my career for that chance of a bet. Totally understandable.
The government always wins at the end of the day, but yeah.
Because I was waiting for you to test the limits of the donation system with that victory. So, but we'll just have to do that next year. That's fine.
If it makes me feel better, I still don't think the Eagles will win at all. So, I think you still saved some money. I think this is the Bills' year.
Yeah, could be
for Buffalo.
They just got to get healthy now. That secondary has just been ravaged. Didn't they lose? I think both safeties at least for a little while. I think Poyer's back now.
Poyer had a big kick last game.
But Hyde, I think, is out for most of the season, if not the whole season or longer. So certainly hope he gets healthy soon. But yeah, guys, thank you all so much for hanging out. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Those metrics really help us out. If you're interested in supporting the show, you can do so on Patreon, patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. You can sign up, help us out, get early access to all the podcast episodes, including the audio version of this episode. We'll also be having, I believe our Q&A is going to be next Monday. Still checking in with Dave Choate, the boss man himself, to figure out when he can do it. Probably Monday, maybe Tuesday. I'll keep you guys posted on that one. But that'll be coming soon. Also another exclusive patron benefit. So if you want to get in on that, ask as many questions as you want. Get the scoop behind the hashtag Dave Meet bit. Maybe some of you are still trying to figure out what that means. And to be honest, we're all trying to figure out what that means. But,
honestly, I still don't know what that means.
I don't know either, but it's provocative. It gets the people going.
People talking.
Yeah, it gets the people going. But first of all, I want to thank Aaron Freeman at FalcFans, host of the Locked On Falcons podcast and wonderful contributor over at the mother site, thefalcoholic.com. Aaron, thanks for coming on. Anything else you'd like to plug?
People jump over to Locked On Falcons on YouTube right now. There should be an episode previewing this Week 5 matchup with Locked On Bucks for crossover Thursday. That will be on deck as well. And then later in the week, we'll be joined by Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta to get the keys to victory and how the Falcons can finally get their Tom Brady revenge this weekend. That will, this is the time where the Bucks and Tom Brady look the most vulnerable they can be. So if they can get that first W against Tom Brady, it would be much, much appreciated.
Yeah. We only probably got 2 chances left. So I think we should not take our chances at all and just get that W here and make sure we can get at least 1 dub against Tom Brady.
Maybe 3 chances. You never know.
That's true.
Maybe the Falcons meet them in the NFC Championship game.
I would love, though, if Desmond Ridder is starting, his first start is Week 18, and that's Tom Brady's last start, and his first start is beating Tom Brady. He will.
No one else could do it like the entire time, and then
Put him
just
in the
Ridder
Ring of
comes.
Honor.
Yeah,
off of
no,
one
he would
start.
just immediately be in the Hall of Fame for
Yeah.
the Falcons. Just he doesn't have to do anything else. He can actually just retire at that point. Please don't. But we still need you. But looking forward to it. Also with us tonight, as you guys have seen, Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way, co-host of this spectacular program and another long-term contributor over at thefalcoholic.com. Adnan, anything that you're working on you'd like to let the people know about?
Series history, going over the series, Falcon series history against the Bucks. Right now, the Bucks are leading it 29-28. Overall, they've won 4 in a row since Tom Brady got there, so it'll be great for the Falcons to tie that up this weekend and to, maybe even take the lead in Week 18, retake the lead. I'll have what if the Falcons win / what if they lose going on Sunday on game day, and I have fantasy stud and dud going on. I think Dave pushes that out on Tuesdays now. It used to be on Mondays. But yeah, definitely just check out the site. Check out the Falcoholic.com for all of your, Falcons needs, and a big thank you to all the viewers, all of our regulars, who are constantly in here, constantly with us throughout the season. I love seeing all the familiar names in the chat. And finally, let's go Braves. It's let's go repeat, and let's go have another parade in Atlanta this next month in November.
Yeah, get a parade in Atlanta, and then get another parade in Atlanta after the Super Bowl win. We're owed one from 2016, so we need to cash that in. At any time really would be good. Falcons, thank you. Yeah, guys, again, thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. You can check out all my stuff on thefalcoholic.com. We'll have our game preview show with Alan Stirk and a special Bucks guest. That'll be out on Friday morning. And then we will have this game coming on Sunday. Tough game. There's a decent chance, of course. It's a divisional game. The Falcons could pull out something. Gonna need a big contribution from the ground game once again. But it's possible. It's possible. So, again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in with us tonight. For myself, for Adnan, and for our special guest, Aaron Freeman. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Falcoholic Live. Have a great night, folks.